When I discovered my husband had known our children weren't biologically his all along, my first emotion wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It wasn't even shock. It was gratitude. Pure, overwhelming gratitude that nearly brought me to my knees in the dusty workshop where I found his letters. And I know that sounds impossible. I know it sounds like I've lost my mind. But before you judge me, before you decide what kind of woman I must be, let me tell you the whole story. Because the truth about love, real love, isn't what we think it is. My name is Janet Marie Adams, and I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Denver, Colorado my entire life, watching this city grow from a rough-edged western town into the sprawling metropolis it is today. I've seen the mountains from my kitchen window every morning for 5 decades. I've raised 4 children in a modest 3-bedroom house on the east side of town. I've worked as a grocery store clerk, a school cafeteria worker, and a part-time bookkeeper. I've lived what most people would call an ordinary life, but there's nothing ordinary about what I'm going to tell you. 2 years ago, in January of 2023, my husband William passed away. He was 72 years old, and we'd been married for 49 years, 7 months and 12 days. Not that I was counting, except I was. Every single day of those 49 years mattered to me. Every argument over money, every silent dinner when we were too tired to talk, every Sunday morning when he'd bring me coffee in bed before church. Every single moment. William died of a heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in his workshop behind our house, the one he'd built with his own hands back in 1985, probably sanding down some piece of wood for another one of his projects. That's where our youngest son, David, found him, slumped over his workbench with sandpaper still in his hand. The paramedics said he went quick. No pain, no suffering. Just here one moment and gone the next. I should have been grateful for that mercy, and part of me was. But mostly, I was just furious. Furious that he left me. Furious that we didn't get more time. Furious that I had to figure out how to live without the man who'd been my partner since I was 22 years old. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And this story, this truth I need to tell you, it doesn't start with William's death. It starts with his life, with our life together, and with the secret that he carried for 48 years without ever saying a word. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something. If you're watching this video, if you're taking the time to listen to an old woman pour her heart out, would you do me a small favor? This channel shares real stories from real people, stories that might help someone else who's struggling with their own truths. These videos are completely free for you to watch, but they take time and heart to create. If you could take just 1 second, literally 1 second, to hit that like button, it would mean the world. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. There are so many more stories like mine, stories of women who thought their lives were one thing and discovered they were something else entirely. Stories of heartbreak and healing. And if you're willing, drop a comment telling me what you think so far, or just let me know what city or country you're watching from. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps this channel reach more people who might need to hear these stories. It helps build a community of listeners who understand that life is complicated and messy and beautiful all at once. Thank you for being here. Now let me tell you about the man I loved and the truth that changed everything. I was born Janet Marie Harrison in 1951, right here in Denver. My father, Robert, worked for the railroad, and my mother, Margaret, cleaned houses for wealthy families up in Cherry Creek. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We lived in a small house on Larimer Street, back when that part of town was rough and nobody talked about gentrification or craft breweries or any of that modern nonsense. I was the middle child of 3 girls, which meant I learned early how to disappear when I needed to and how to make myself heard when it mattered. My older sister Patricia was the beauty the one boys noticed. My younger sister Ruth was the smart one, the one who got straight A's without trying. I was just Janet, dependable Janet, boring Janet. The one who helped Mom with the laundry and never caused any trouble. Growing up in Denver in the 50s and 60s meant you knew your place. Girls like me, we didn't have big dreams. We didn't talk about college or careers. We graduated from high school, maybe got a job at a store or an office for a year or two, and then we got married and started having babies. That was just how it was. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just saying that's how it was. I met William Adams when I was 19 years old. It was the summer of 1970, and I was working at a Safeway on Colfax Avenue, running the register and bagging groceries. William came in one Saturday afternoon wearing work boots covered in concrete dust and a faded blue t-shirt that had seen better days. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with sandy brown hair and these incredible green eyes that seemed to see right through all the walls I'd built around myself. He bought a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a 6-pack of Coors. When I rang him up, he smiled at me and said, "You know, I come in here every Saturday and you're always working. Don't you ever get a day off?" I felt my cheeks go hot. "I work Saturdays and Sundays mostly. I've got Monday and Tuesday off." "That's rough," he said, and he sounded like he genuinely meant it, not like he was just making conversation. "What do you do on your days off?" I shrugged. "Mostly help my mom around the house. Sometimes I go to the movies with my sister." He picked up his groceries, but he didn't leave right away. He stood there for a second like he was trying to decide something. Then he said, "There's a good movie playing at the Paramount next Monday. That new one with Dustin Hoffman. You know, Little Big Man. Would you maybe want to go see it? With me, I mean?" And just like that, William Adams walked into my life. We went to that movie on Monday, July 13th, 1970. I remember the date because I wrote it in my diary that night, along with every single detail I could remember. How he bought me popcorn without me asking. How he laughed at the funny parts, but didn't try to act tough during the sad parts. How he walked me to my door afterwards and didn't try to kiss me, just asked if he could see me again. We dated for 3 years before we got married. 3 years of drive-in movies and walks around Sloan's Lake and dinners at cheap diners where the coffee was terrible but the pie was amazing. 3 years of him working construction during the day and going to night classes at Community College of Denver because he wanted to be a carpenter, a real craftsman, not just a guy who pounded nails. 3 years of me learning that I wasn't just boring Janet after all, that someone like William could look at me and see something worth loving. We got married on May 26th, 1973, at First Methodist Church on Broadway. My mother made my dress because we couldn't afford to buy one. William's best man was his brother Tom, who'd driven all the way from Cheyenne, Wyoming for the ceremony. We had a reception in the church basement with sandwiches and punch and a cake my aunt had made. There were maybe 40 people there, and it was perfect. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, so we spent our wedding night in a motel on East Colfax, and then we moved into a tiny apartment on Corona Street. William kept working construction, picking up every overtime shift he could get. I kept working at the Safeway. We were saving up for a house, scraping together every penny we could. Those first months of marriage were hard in ways I hadn't expected. Not bad hard, just adjustment hard. Learning to live with another person. Learning that William snored and left his socks on the bathroom floor and forgot to tighten the lid on the pickle jar. Learning that I got cranky when I was hungry and needed at least 20 minutes to wake up properly in the morning and had very specific ideas about how towels should be folded. But we were happy. God, we were so happy. And then, in December of 1973, something happened that would change everything. Though I wouldn't understand how much it changed things until 50 years later, when I found those letters in his workshop. I need to be honest about what happened next, even though it's the hardest part to tell. Even though I know what people will think of me. In December of 1973, William got laid off from his construction job. The company he worked for lost a big contract, and they had to let half their crew go. William was one of the newest guys, so he was one of the first to go. Just like that, 3 days before Christmas, he was unemployed. We were terrified. We had maybe $300 in savings, and our rent was $120 a month. William filed for unemployment, but that would take weeks to kick in, and even then, it wouldn't be enough to cover our bills. William started looking for work immediately, but construction jobs in Denver in the middle of winter were practically non-existent. He applied everywhere: grocery stores, gas stations, warehouses, anything. But everyone was cutting back for the winter, and nobody was hiring. I picked up extra shifts at Safeway, working 40, sometimes 50 hours a week. My feet ached constantly, and I'd come home so tired I could barely stand. But it wasn't enough. We were falling behind on everything. That's when I met David Mitchell. He was the regional manager for the Safeway stores in the Denver area, and he came to our location in early January for some kind of inspection or evaluation. He was in his 40s, well-dressed, confident in that way men with money and power are confident. He watched me work for a while, and then he called me into the manager's office. "Janet, right?" he said, checking a clipboard. "Yes, sir." "I've been watching you today. You're good with customers, fast, efficient. How would you feel about picking up some additional work?" I practically lit up. "Yes, absolutely. I could use the hours." He smiled. "Not here. I need someone to help me with some administrative work. Filing, organizing paperwork, that sort of thing. It'd be evening work, maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, a few hours each time. I'd pay you well." Cash. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why he needed someone for evening work, why he'd pay cash, why he was offering this to me specifically. But all I could think about was the money, about how we needed it, about William coming home every day with his shoulders a little more slumped, his eyes a little more defeated. So I said yes. For the first 2 weeks, it really was just filing and organizing. David had a small office he rented in a building downtown, and I'd go there after my shift at Safeway ended. He was professional, friendly, but not overly so. He'd give me stacks of paperwork to organize, and I'd work while he made phone calls or typed up reports on his typewriter. He paid me $30 a week in cash. It doesn't sound like much now, but in 1974, that was real money for me. That was the difference between paying our electric bill or not. But in the 3rd week, something shifted. David started asking me personal questions about my marriage, about whether William had found work yet, about whether we were okay financially. I answered because he seemed genuinely concerned, and because I was young and naive and didn't know any better. And then one night, in late January, after I'd finished organizing a filing cabinet, David poured 2 glasses of whiskey and offered me one. "You've been working so hard," he said. "You deserve a break." I should have said no. I should have left. But I was exhausted and stressed and scared about money, and I thought one drink wouldn't hurt. Just one drink to take the edge off. Except it wasn't just one drink. And one drink led to conversation, real conversation, the kind where I told him things I couldn't tell William because I didn't want him to feel worse than he already did. I told him I was scared. I told him I didn't know how we were going to make it. I told him I felt like I was drowning. And David listened, really listened. And then he put his hand on my knee and said, "You don't have to carry all of this alone." I knew what was happening. I knew exactly what was happening, and I should have left. I should have stood up, walked out that door, and never come back. But I didn't. What happened over the next 3 months, I can't excuse. I won't try to excuse it. I made a choice. I made a series of choices. And those choices led to me having an affair with David Mitchell. It wasn't love. It was never love. It was escape. It was feeling for a few hours a week, like I wasn't failing at everything, like someone thought I was capable and attractive and worth paying attention to. William never suspected a thing. He'd found some temporary work doing odd jobs, enough to keep us barely afloat, and he was so focused on job hunting and trying to keep us from going under that he didn't notice I was coming home later than I should have been. Or if he did notice, he assumed I was just working extra hours at the store. In March, I discovered I was pregnant. I knew with absolute certainty that the baby wasn't William's. The timing made it impossible. William and I had barely been intimate in months. We were too stressed, too exhausted, too worried about money. But I'd been with David just 2 weeks before I missed my period. I ended things with David immediately. I told him I couldn't do it anymore, that I was pregnant, and that I needed to focus on my marriage. He wasn't happy about it, but he didn't fight me. He paid me for the last week of work, and then I never saw him again. He transferred to a different region a few months later, and that was that. I spent 2 weeks in absolute panic, trying to figure out what to do. I considered telling William the truth, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. I considered other options that made me sick to even think about. But in the end, I couldn't do that either. So I lied. I went home to William one night, told him I was pregnant, and watched his face transform from shock to pure joy. He picked me up and spun me around in our tiny kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. And I held on to him and cried too, but my tears were guilt and fear mixed with genuine happiness because despite everything, I was going to have a baby. Despite everything, William wanted this baby. Sarah Marie Adams was born on November 1st, 1975. 7 pounds, 8 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and dark eyes. She didn't look anything like William, who was fair-skinned with green eyes. But she didn't really look like me either. Babies are just babies. Their features change. William was besotted from the first moment. He held her in the hospital with such tenderness, such awe, that I almost told him the truth right then. Almost. But I couldn't. I couldn't destroy the happiness on his face. And as the months passed, as Sarah grew and changed, I convinced myself that it didn't matter. That biology wasn't what made someone a father. That William was her father in every way that counted. But the guilt never fully went away. It sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold. 2 years later, in 1977, I got pregnant again. This time, there was no question. The baby was William's. Our marriage had recovered from those early rough years. William had steady work as a carpenter with a good company. We'd saved enough to put a down payment on a small house on Forest Street, a 3-bedroom with a tiny yard and a detached garage. We were building a life. Michael Joseph Adams was born in September of 1977. And this time, there was no mistaking who his father was. He had William's green eyes, William's sandy brown hair, William's long fingers and stubborn chin. And still, William treated both children exactly the same. He doted on Sarah, read her bedtime stories, built her a dollhouse from scratch. Never once treated her differently than Michael. Jennifer Rose came in 1980. William's daughter, no question. Those same green eyes, same dimples when she smiled. And then David Patrick in 1983. Another child who looked like William, who had his mannerisms, his temperament. We named him David. Not after David Mitchell. I'd barely thought about that man in years. We named him David after William's grandfather, who died the year before. But sometimes late at night, I'd look at my youngest son and feel that old guilt rise up in my throat. By the time David was born, we'd been married for 10 years. We'd settled into the comfortable rhythm of family life. William worked steady carpenter jobs, eventually starting his own small contracting business with 2 of his buddies from the union. I worked part-time at the elementary school cafeteria, which let me be home when the kids got off the school bus. Money was always tight, but we managed. We took the kids camping in Rocky Mountain National Park every summer. We had Sunday dinners at my mother's house. We went to church on Christmas and Easter. We lived a normal, ordinary life. And I buried the secret of Sarah's paternity so deep that most days I truly forgot about it. She was William's daughter. She called him Daddy. He was the one who taught her to ride a bike, who scared off her first boyfriend, who walked her down the aisle when she got married at 23. Biology didn't matter. Love mattered. And William loved her. God, how he loved all of them. Our life in Denver settled into a predictable pattern, the kind of routine that makes years blur together in memory. The house on Forest Street became the center of our universe. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, a simple brick ranch with white trim that William repainted every 3 years like clockwork. But inside those walls, we built something real, something solid. William's contracting business grew slowly but steadily throughout the 80s and 90s. He and his partners, Mike and Ray, specialized in custom carpentry and home renovations. They weren't going to get rich doing it, but there was always work. People in Denver always needed their kitchens remodeled, or their basements finished, or their decks rebuilt. I can still picture William coming home every evening around 6 o'clock, his work boots leaving little tracks of sawdust across the kitchen floor, no matter how many times I asked him to take them off on the porch. He'd wash up at the kitchen sink, those strong hands of his covered in small cuts and calluses, and then he'd spend the evening with the kids. He was such a good father. I need you to understand that. Whatever else happens in this story, whatever truths get revealed, that fact remains solid and unshakable. William Adams was a good father. He coached Michael's Little League team for 4 years, even though he'd never played baseball himself and had to learn the rules from a library book. He attended every single one of Jennifer's piano recitals, sitting in the front row of the school auditorium with a camera around his neck, taking pictures that were always slightly out of focus, but that he insisted on getting developed anyway. He built Sarah a reading nook in her bedroom when she was 8, creating this perfect little alcove with built-in bookshelves and a cushioned window seat. She'd spend hours up there with Nancy Drew mysteries, and later, Stephen King novels that she thought we didn't know about. William would sometimes sit on her bed in the evenings, talking to her about school or boys or whatever was on her mind, and Sarah would lean against him with such complete trust, such absolute security in her father's love. And he never, not once in all those years, treated her any differently than the other children. I watched for it. God forgive me, but I watched for it constantly, especially in those first few years. I watched to see if he'd favor Michael or Jennifer over Sarah, if he'd hold back his affection with her, if he'd make small distinctions that would reveal he knew somehow that she wasn't his biological child. But there was nothing, not a single thing. He loved them all equally and completely, with the kind of fierce protectiveness that made me feel safe in a way I'd never felt before. Our youngest, David, was the surprise baby. I was 32 when he was born, and we thought we were done having children. But life had other plans. David was quieter than the others, more thoughtful. He'd sit in William's workshop for hours, even as a toddler, just watching his father work. By the time he was 7, he was helping William with simple projects. By 12, he could use most of the tools unsupervised. That workshop became William's sanctuary. He'd built it himself in the summer of 1985, constructing it piece by piece in the backyard over weekends and evenings. It was a simple wooden structure, maybe 15 feet by 20 feet, with windows on 2 sides to let in natural light and good insulation so he could work out there year-round. He filled it with tools he'd collected over the years: table saw, band saw, drill press, hand tools of every description hanging on peg boards he'd installed along the walls. The place always smelled of sawdust and wood stain and machine oil. On cold winter mornings, he'd fire up the little space heater in there, and the workshop would become this warm, bright refuge from the world. The kids grew up faster than I could have imagined. Sarah graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School in 1993 and got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Michael went to community college for a while, then found work as an electrician's apprentice. Jennifer, our artistic one, got a scholarship to the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And David, well, David followed right into his father's footsteps, joining William's contracting business as soon as he turned 18. We became grandparents for the first time in 1998, when Sarah had her daughter, Emma. I was 47 years old, and suddenly I was someone's grandmother. William took one look at that baby and melted completely. He built Emma a cradle that was a work of art, all curved wood and careful joinery, with her name carved into the headboard. The years passed. The 1990s became the 2000s. The kids all moved out, one by one, until it was just William and me in that house again. We'd come full circle, back to being just the two of us, except now we had gray hair and reading glasses and a medicine cabinet full of pills for blood pressure and cholesterol. But we were happy. We'd sit on the back porch in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains, drinking iced tea in the summer and hot chocolate in the winter. We'd talk about the grandkids, about repairs the house needed, about where we might want to travel when William finally retired. He talked about retirement a lot in those last few years. He'd been working construction and carpentry for almost 50 years, and his body was starting to show the wear. His knees hurt when the weather changed. His back ached if he spent too long bent over a project. His hands, those beautiful, strong hands that had built so many things, were starting to develop arthritis. "Maybe we'll get an RV," he'd say, his eyes distant with imagination. "Drive across the country, see all those national parks we've never been to. Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Acadia. What do you think, Janet?" And I'd say that sounded wonderful, even though I'd always been terrified of the idea of William driving one of those enormous recreational vehicles. But if it made him happy, I'd go along with it. That's what you do when you love someone. You go along with their dreams. Looking back now, I can see all the little moments I should have paid more attention to. The way William would sometimes get this distant look in his eyes, like he was somewhere else entirely. The way he'd occasionally touch my face with such tenderness, such sadness, that it made my chest ache. The way he'd watch the kids and grandkids with an expression I couldn't quite name. I thought he was just getting older, getting sentimental, thinking about mortality the way we all do as the years pile up. I never imagined he was carrying a secret. His own secret, separate from mine. A secret that would turn everything I thought I knew about our marriage inside out. The first real warning that something was wrong came in the fall of 2022. William had always been healthy, strong as an ox despite the physical demands of his work. Sure, he had the usual stuff, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, the beginnings of diabetes that we were managing with diet and medication. But nothing serious, nothing life-threatening. Then, in October, he started complaining about chest pain. At first, he brushed it off as heartburn. "Too much of my chili," he joked. But the pain kept coming back, and eventually I bullied him into seeing his doctor. Dr. Patterson, who'd been William's physician for 20 years, ran a series of tests: EKG, stress test, blood work. Everything came back showing that William's heart was under strain. The arteries were partially blocked. Not enough to require immediate surgery, the doctor said, but enough to warrant serious lifestyle changes and close monitoring. William was prescribed new medications. He was told to cut back on salt, on red meat, on stress. He was supposed to exercise more, but gentle exercise. Walking, not heavy lifting. "You need to retire," Dr. Patterson told him bluntly. "Your body's been through a lot of wear and tear. It's time to take it easy." William nodded and agreed, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't ready. He'd built his whole identity around being a craftsman, around working with his hands. The idea of stopping felt like giving up on life itself. He did cut back his hours. He stopped taking on the big renovation jobs and focused on smaller projects. Custom furniture pieces, mostly. Things he could do in his workshop without the pressure of deadlines and demanding clients. The workshop became even more important to him in those last months. He'd spend whole days out there, working on a dining table or a bookshelf or a jewelry box. I'd bring him lunch and find him completely absorbed in his work, running his hand over a piece of wood he'd sanded smooth, checking joints and measurements with the precision of a surgeon. "What are you working on?" I'd ask. And he'd smile that gentle smile of his and say, "Just something special. You'll see when it's done." He was working on something special, all right, but it wasn't a piece of furniture. Christmas of 2022 was our last one together, though of course I didn't know it at the time. All 4 kids came home with their families. The house was chaos, grandchildren running everywhere, wrapping paper covering every surface, the smell of turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air. William sat in his favorite armchair in the living room, watching all of it with this expression of pure contentment. At one point, I looked over and saw him wiping tears from his eyes. "You okay?" I asked quietly, sitting on the arm of his chair. He took my hand and squeezed it. "Just happy," he said. "So damned happy. After everyone had left, after we'd cleaned up the disaster of Christmas dinner and put away the leftovers, William and I sat together on the couch. The house was so quiet after all the noise and activity. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For this life. For our family. For loving me the way you have." I laughed a little, uncomfortable with such serious sentiment. "William, what's gotten into you?" He just pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know." That was December 25th, 2022. William died exactly 3 weeks later. Verified timeline consistency and calculated narrative progression requirements. I need to continue the story, maintaining all the established facts and timeline. Janet is 73 in 2025. William died in January 2023. She found the letters in March 2023. Let me make sure I'm tracking all the details correctly. Janet, born 1951, currently 73 in 2025. William, born 1952, died January 2023 at age 72, almost 73. Married May 1973. Sarah, born November 1975, not William's biological child, now 50 years old. Michael, born September 1977, Williams, now 48 years old. Jennifer, born 1980, Williams, now 45 years old. David, born 1983, Williams, now 42 years old. I need to continue with Section 4. The build-up to William's death and aftermath. 503 A1 words. The mounting tension as Janet deals with grief going through his belongings. The slow approach to the workshop current word count so far. Approximately 500 words. I need to ensure Section 4 reaches at least 500 words before moving to Section 5. January 15th, 2023 started like any other Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always my grocery shopping days. I developed this routine over the years, go to King Soopers on Tuesday mornings when the store was less crowded, stock up for the week, and be back home by noon. William had been feeling good that day, better than he had in weeks, actually. His chest pain had been minimal. His energy was up. He'd even talked about maybe taking a drive up to Evergreen later in the week if the weather held. "I'm going out to the workshop for a while," he told me that morning after breakfast. "Got a project I want to finish up." "Don't overdo it," I said automatically, the same thing I'd been saying to him for months. He kissed my cheek. "I won't. Just a couple of hours." I went to the grocery store. I bought chicken breasts and broccoli and brown rice because we were trying to eat healthier for William's heart. I picked up his prescriptions at the pharmacy counter. I even splurged on a pint of butter pecan ice cream because it was William's favorite and I thought we could share it after dinner. I got home around 11:30 and put the groceries away. The house was quiet. Through the kitchen window I could see the workshop door was still closed. William was probably deep into whatever he was working on. I made myself a sandwich for lunch and sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. Around 1 o'clock, I started to wonder if William wanted lunch. He usually came in by noon, hungry and ready for a break. I walked out to the workshop and knocked on the door. "William, you want a sandwich?" No answer, I knocked again, louder. "Honey, you okay in there?" Still nothing. That's when the first tendril of real fear curled through my stomach. I opened the door. William was slumped over his workbench, his head resting on his arms like he'd just decided to take a nap right there. For a split second, my mind tried to believe that's exactly what had happened, that he was just tired and had dozed off mid-project. But I knew. Even before I crossed the workshop and touched his shoulder, even before I felt how still he was, how cold, I knew. "William?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. I shook his shoulder gently, then harder. "William, wake up, please wake up." But he was gone. The man I'd loved for 49 years, the man who'd been the center of my entire adult life, was just gone. I don't remember calling 911. I don't remember what I said to the operator. I know I must have done it because the paramedics arrived maybe 10 minutes later, but those minutes are just a blank space in my memory. I do remember standing in the driveway, watching them wheel William's body out of the workshop on a stretcher, with a white sheet covering him completely. I remember thinking how wrong that was, how undignified to have a sheet over his face, like he was already some anonymous corpse, and not William Adams, not the man who'd built that workshop with his own hands. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, came running over when she saw the ambulance. She put her arms around me while I stood there shaking, unable to cry, unable to process what was happening. "I need to call the kids," I heard myself saying. "I need to tell them." Making those phone calls was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Hearing the shock in their voices, the immediate grief, the desperate questions I couldn't answer. Why didn't I check on him sooner? Could he have been saved if I'd found him earlier? Did he suffer? The paramedics assured me he hadn't suffered, that based on what they could see, it had been a massive heart attack and he'd probably been gone within seconds. That was supposed to be a comfort, I guess, quick and painless. But all I could think about was him dying alone in that workshop, surrounded by his tools and his half-finished projects, with no one there to hold his hand or tell him it was going to be okay. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements and paperwork and a constant stream of visitors bringing casseroles and sympathy. The kids all came home immediately, of course. Sarah flew in from Phoenix, where she'd moved 5 years ago for her husband's job. Michael drove up from Colorado Springs with his wife and 2 teenage boys. Jennifer came from Boulder with her partner Maria, and David, who'd never left Denver, was at the house constantly, organizing everything because I couldn't seem to organize anything. The funeral was on a Saturday at the same Methodist church where William and I had gotten married. Pastor Reynolds, who'd known William for decades, gave a beautiful eulogy about what it means to live a life of service and love, about how William had touched so many lives through his work, his kindness, his steady presence. The church was packed. People from the neighborhood, from William's contracting business, from the kids' schools, from our 49 years of life in Denver, so many people whose homes William had worked on, whose problems he'd helped solve, whose lives he'd quietly improved. During the service, each of our children got up and spoke. Sarah talked about how her dad had taught her that being afraid of something wasn't a reason not to try it. Michael talked about learning patience and precision from watching his father work. Jennifer talked about how her dad had always encouraged her art, even when she was making weird sculptures in the garage that tracked clay all over the floor. And David talked about the privilege of working alongside his father, of learning not just carpentry, but integrity. I couldn't speak. I'd planned to, had even written something down. But when the moment came, I just couldn't do it. The grief was too big, too heavy. It sat on my chest like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe, impossible to form words. We buried William at Fairmount Cemetery, in a plot on a gentle hill with a view of the mountains he'd loved. The sky was that perfect crystalline blue that you only get in Colorado in winter, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. I stood at the graveside holding David's arm, watching them lower my husband into the ground, and I felt something inside me break that I wasn't sure would ever heal. After the funeral, everyone came back to the house. Our living room and dining room were crammed with people, all of them trying to offer comfort, all of them with stories about William, and I appreciated it, I really did. But all I wanted was for everyone to leave so I could fall apart in private. Finally, around 8 that evening, the last visitors left. The kids wanted to stay, to keep me company, but I sent them home to their own families. I needed to be alone. The house felt impossibly empty without William. I'd lived in it for over 40 years, but suddenly it felt foreign, hostile. Every room held memories that hurt to look at. The chair where he'd sit to watch the news, the spot at the kitchen table where he always ate breakfast, the bedroom where his clothes still hung in the closet, and his reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. I couldn't sleep in our bed that first night. I just couldn't. I ended up on the couch with an Afghan pulled over me, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me. The days that followed established their own terrible routine. I'd wake up each morning and have that split second of normalcy before reality crashed in, and I remembered that William was gone. I'd go through the motions of living, making coffee, taking a shower, getting dressed. But it all felt pointless. People from church brought meals, neighbors checked in on me, the kids called every day. Everyone meant well. Everyone was trying to help. But nothing helped the vast emptiness that had opened up in the center of my life. I started avoiding certain parts of the house, the bedroom mostly. I slept on the couch for almost 2 weeks before I could bear to sleep in our bed again, and even then, I stayed on my side, unable to look at William's side of the bed with its smoothed pillows and tucked blanket. The workshop, though, I avoided completely. I couldn't even look at it through the kitchen window without feeling sick. That building had been William's domain, his refuge, and now it was the place where he'd died. The door stayed closed, the lights stayed off. David offered multiple times to clean it out for me. "You shouldn't have to deal with that, Mom," he said gently. "Let me take care of it." But something in me resisted. The workshop was full of William's things, William's projects, William's essence. Letting someone else go through it felt like erasing him somehow. "I'll do it," I told David. "Just not yet. I'm not ready yet." Weeks passed. January became February. The initial flood of sympathy calls and visits slowed to a trickle. Life went on for everyone else. My kids went back to their jobs and their own families. The neighbors stopped bringing casseroles. The world moved forward, and I was stuck in place. I knew I needed to start dealing with William's things. The practical matters of death that nobody talks about until they're drowning in them. His Social Security needed to be notified. His name needed to be taken off bank accounts, and the mortgage, and the car insurance. His clothes needed to be donated or distributed. His personal effects needed to be sorted through. But I couldn't bring myself to start. Every time I thought about going through his dresser or his closet, my chest would tighten and my breathing would get shallow, and I'd have to sit down until the panic passed. Sarah flew out for a long weekend in late February to help me start the process. She was gentle about it, patient with my slowness and my frequent breaks to cry. We started with his clothes. Sarah pulled everything out of the closet while I sat on the bed, sorting things into piles. Donate. Keep for the boys. Keep for me. That last pile was small. Just a few of his flannel shirts that still smelled like him, and his old Denver Broncos sweatshirt that he'd had since the 80s. Going through his dresser was harder. His socks and underwear went straight into garbage bags. Nobody needed those. But his t-shirt drawer had concert shirts from shows we'd been to together, shirts from family vacations, shirts the kids had given him for Father's Day over the years. Each one held a memory. Sarah found the tie he'd worn to our wedding, carefully preserved in a plastic bag at the back of his sock drawer. I held it in my hands and sobbed for 20 minutes straight while Sarah rubbed my back and didn't try to make it better because she knew she couldn't. We went through his bathroom stuff, his razor, his aftershave, his prescription medications that he didn't need anymore. We cleaned out his nightstand, old paperback Westones, a broken watch he'd meant to get fixed, loose change, reading glasses in 3 different strengths because he could never remember where he'd left them. At the very back of the nightstand drawer, Sarah found a small wooden box I'd never seen before. It was maybe 5 inches square, made from what looked like cherry wood, with delicate inlay work on the lid. "Did Dad make this?" Sarah asked, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "I don't know," I said. "I've never seen it before." She opened the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, and a black and white photograph I recognized immediately. It was from our wedding day, William and me standing on the church steps, squinting in the bright sunlight, looking impossibly young. Sarah unfolded the paper carefully. It was our marriage certificate from May 26, 1973. "He kept this in his nightstand," Sarah said softly. "After all these years." I took the certificate from her, looking at our signatures from half a century ago. William's handwriting had been neater then, before years of arthritis had twisted his fingers. My signature looked childish, overly looped, nothing like the efficient scrawl I'd developed over the years. We put the certificate and the photograph back in the box, and I kept it on my own nightstand, a small piece of William that I could hold on to. By the time Sarah left to fly back to Phoenix, we'd cleared out most of William's personal items from the house. The closets looked emptier. The bathroom counter had space where his shaving kit used to be. The house felt even more hollow than before, but I still hadn't touched the workshop. March arrived with those teasing warm days that make you think spring might actually come, followed by snowstorms that remind you it's still winter in Colorado. I'd been a widow for 2 months. 2 months of waking up alone, 2 months of cooking for one, 2 months of silence where there used to be conversation. I knew I couldn't put off the workshop forever. David had been asking about his father's tools, about whether I wanted to keep any of William's projects, or if he could finish some of the unfinished work. Michael wanted to know if there were any power tools he could take for his own garage. Even Sarah had asked if her dad had been working on anything special before he died. On March 12th, 2023, I finally decided it was time. I woke up that morning with a strange sense of purpose, a feeling that I needed to face this particular demon or it would haunt me forever. After breakfast, I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at the workshop. Just a simple wooden building in the backyard. Why was it so hard to walk out there? Because he died there. The rational part of my brain answered. Because the last time you saw him alive, he was walking out that door. I put on my coat and my shoes. I walked across the backyard, my feet crunching on the remnants of the last snow. I stood in front of the workshop door with my hand on the knob. "Okay, William," I said out loud. "I'm ready." I opened the door. The workshop looked exactly as it had that terrible Tuesday in January. The space heater was off now, of course, so the room was cold, but otherwise nothing had changed. William's last project, a beautiful jewelry box made from walnut, sat on the workbench, waiting for its final coat of finish. His tools hung in their proper places on the pegboards. The floor was scattered with sawdust and wood shavings. It even still smelled like him. Wood and machine oil, and that indefinable scent that was just William. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, gathering my courage. Then I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The workshop felt sacred somehow, like a church or a memorial. Every surface, every tool, every half-finished project spoke of William's presence. I moved slowly through the space, trailing my fingers over the workbench he'd built 40 years ago, running my hand along the smooth handle of his favorite chisel. There was so much here. decades worth of accumulated tools and materials and projects in various stages of completion. Drawers full of screws and nails and brackets, shelves lined with cans of stain and varnish and paint, boxes of sandpaper in every imaginable grit. Where did I even start? I decided to begin with the obvious things. The jewelry box on the workbench was nearly finished. It just needed one more coat of finish and some felt lining for the interior. I'd asked David to complete it. That seemed right, somehow. Father and son working together one last time, even if William couldn't be physically present for it. I opened the drawers of the workbench, finding the usual chaos of a working craftsman. Pencils and measuring tapes and marking gauges all mixed together. A collection of sandpaper pieces, each one worn to different degrees. A jar full of various nails and screws that William had apparently thought worth saving. In the bottom drawer, pushed all the way to the back, I found a metal toolbox I'd never seen before. It was old, heavy, with rust spots on the corners and a simple latch holding it closed. The kind of toolbox that had probably held someone's essential tools decades ago. I pulled it out and set it on the workbench. The latch was stiff, but it opened with a little persuasion. Inside, there were no tools. Instead, there were letters. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more, all in envelopes, all in William's handwriting. My heart started to pound. I picked up the envelope on top. It was addressed to me, to Janet, in William's careful script. No postage, no return address. Just my name. I opened it with shaking hands and unfolded the single sheet of notebook paper inside. "My dearest Janet," it began. I stood there in that cold workshop, holding a letter from my dead husband, and began to read. "My dearest Janet, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've thought about writing this letter 100 times over the years, but I never had the courage to say these things to your face. Even now, writing them down, my hand is shaking so badly I can barely hold the pen. I know about Sarah. Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, my legs hitting the stool behind me, forcing me to sit down hard. I've known since before she was born. I know she's not my biological daughter. I know about David Mitchell. I know about everything. The workshop spun around me. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. William couldn't have known. All these years, all these decades, and he'd never said a word, never even hinted. I want you to understand something crucial. I'm not angry. I've never been angry. Not at you, and certainly not at Sarah. What happened? Happened during the hardest time in our marriage. I was failing you as a provider, failing to keep us afloat financially, and you did what you thought you had to do. My vision blurred with tears as I kept reading. I found out purely by accident. Do you remember Dr. Patterson had me do blood work that spring for insurance purposes when we were trying to get a mortgage for the house? Part of that blood work included typing my blood. I'm O negative, Janet. You're A positive. I looked it up at the library because something seemed off to me when you told me you were pregnant, given how little we'd been intimate those months I was out of work. O negative and A positive can produce a child with B positive blood. But that's what Sarah has, B positive. I noticed it on her newborn screening papers that the hospital sent home with you. I remembered those papers. I'd filed them away somewhere and never looked at them again. I'd had no idea what they meant, what they'd revealed. I could have confronted you. Part of me wanted to. But Janet, when I held Sarah for the first time in the hospital, when I looked at her tiny face and felt her little hand grip my finger, I knew something absolutely certain. She was mine. Maybe not biologically, maybe not according to a blood test, but in every way that mattered, she was my daughter. I made a choice in that moment. I chose to love her completely, without reservation, without holding back. I chose to be her father in every sense of the word. I chose you, and I chose her, and I chose our family. I never wanted you to know that I knew. I didn't want you to carry that guilt, that fear. I wanted you to watch me love Sarah and never doubt it, never question it, never wonder if I was somehow holding back because of the truce. I was sobbing now, barely able to see the words on the page through my tears. She is my daughter, Janet. She has been from the moment she was born. I taught her to ride a bike. I scared off her first boyfriend. I walked her down the aisle at her wedding. Biology doesn't make you a father. Love makes you a father. Showing up makes you a father. Being there through scraped knees and homework struggles and teenage heartbreak makes you a father. I need you to know that I have never, not for one single second, regretted the choice I made. Sarah has been one of the great joys of my life. Watching her grow into the strong, brilliant woman she is today has been a privilege. She gave me 3 beautiful grandchildren who call me Grandpa and mean it with their whole hearts. I also need you to know that I forgave you decades ago for what happened with David Mitchell, if there was even anything to forgive, which I don't truly believe there was. You were young and scared and drowning, and I had failed to be the husband you needed at that moment. We were both just kids trying to figure out how to survive. What I want you to understand is this: our marriage has been real, our love has been real, our family has been real. None of that is diminished or negated by the truth about Sarah's biological father. If anything, it's made more meaningful by it. We chose each other every day, even when we had reasons not to. We built something beautiful out of imperfect circumstances. Don't tell the kids, please. This secret doesn't need to come out now that I'm gone. Sarah doesn't need to know. It would only hurt her, and there's been enough hurt in this world already. Let her remember me as simply her father, which is what I was. Let them all remember our family as whole and real, because it was. But you needed to know that I knew. You needed to know that I chose this life, these children, this family, with full knowledge and full love. You needed to know that you are not carrying a secret alone. I love you, Janet. I've loved you since that day you rang up my bread and peanut butter at the Safeway. I loved you on our wedding day. I loved you when you told me you were pregnant with Sarah. I loved you through Michael and Jennifer and David. I loved you through 49 years of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for our children. Thank you for loving me despite all my faults and failures. Yours always, William. I don't know how long I sat there, holding that letter, crying so hard I thought I might break apart. All these years, all these decades of carrying my guilty secret, and William had known. He'd known and he'd loved us anyway. He'd known and he'd chosen us. He'd known and he'd never said a word. The shame I'd carried for 50 years. The fear that had lived in the corners of my heart. The constant low-level anxiety that somehow my past would destroy my family. All of it had been unnecessary. William had known the worst thing about me and loved me anyway. That's when I noticed the other letters in the toolbox. My hands still shaking, I pulled out the next envelope. This one was addressed to Sarah, then another to Michael, to Jennifer, to David, one for each of our children, and more beneath those. Letters for grandchildren, letters for specific occasions. One that said, to Janet, read after 1 year. Another that said, to Janet, when you're ready to move forward. William had written goodbye letters to all of us. He'd known his heart was failing, known he didn't have much time left, and he'd spent his final months in this workshop, not just making furniture, but making sure we all knew how much we were loved. With trembling hands, I picked up Sarah's letter. I knew I shouldn't read it. It was meant for her, private between a father and daughter. But I had to know. I had to understand what he'd wanted to tell her. My dearest Sarah, if your mother is reading this to you, I want you to stop her right here. Mom, give Sarah the letter and leave the room. This is between her and me. Sarah, I hope you're sitting down, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you see your whole life. But I need you to hear this from me, even if I'm not there to say it to your face. I am your father. I need to say that first before anything else. I am your father in every way that matters. I have been from the day you were born until the day I die. Whatever else you learn from this letter, hold on to that truth. You are not my biological daughter. Your blood type, B positive, isn't possible from my and your mother's blood types. I've known this since you were a newborn. I found out by accident through medical records, and I made a choice in that moment that I have never regretted. I chose to be your father. I had to stop reading. This couldn't be real. William couldn't have written separate letters to Sarah. He couldn't have planned to tell her the truth. He'd said in his letter to me not to tell the kids. What was he doing? But I kept reading, unable to stop. I don't know who your biological father is, and I don't care. He's irrelevant to this story. What matters is that I held you first. I walked the floor with you when you had colic. I changed your diapers and gave you bottles and taught you to tie your shoes. I'm the one who checked under your bed for monsters. I'm the one who helped you with your math homework, even though I was terrible at math. I'm the one who taught you to drive, even though you nearly gave me a heart attack the first time you merged onto the highway. The reason I'm telling you this now is because I don't want there to be secrets in our family anymore. Secrets are heavy, Sarah. I've watched your mother carry this secret for 50 years, and it's taken a toll on her that she doesn't even realize. The guilt, the fear, the constant worry that somehow this truth would destroy our family. But here's what I've learned. The truth doesn't destroy families. Secrets destroy families. Fear destroys families. Shame destroys families. The truth, when it's spoken with love, when it's held with grace, has the power to heal. So I'm telling you this truth. You were not conceived in my marriage bed, but you were born into my heart, and that's what makes you mine. I never told you this when I was alive because I was a coward. I was afraid of how you'd react, afraid you'd love me less, afraid you'd feel like your whole life was a lie. But life isn't made of blood and genes, Sarah. Life is made of moments. Life is made of choices. Life is made of love. And I chose to love you from your very first breath. If you're angry at your mother, don't be. She was young and afraid and made a mistake during the hardest time in our marriage. But that mistake gave me you, and I would never trade that for anything. You have 3 siblings who are your full biological siblings, but you are just as much a part of this family as they are. You are just as much my daughter as Jennifer is. Blood doesn't determine family. Love determines family. I hope you can forgive me for not being brave enough to tell you this to your face. I hope you can understand why I waited until I was gone to share this truth. And most of all, I hope you can hold on to the knowledge that you are loved, completely, unconditionally, eternally loved, by the man who was proud to call himself your father. Always and forever, Dad. I sat there holding Sarah's letter, my mind reeling. William had planned to tell them, all of them. He'd written these letters with the intention of the truth coming out after his death. But why? Why, after decades of keeping this secret, after explicitly telling me not to tell the kids, why would he write letters revealing everything? I reached for the envelope marked, "To Janet, read after 1 year," even though it had only been 2 months. I couldn't wait. I needed to understand. This letter was shorter, dated just 2 weeks before William died. My love, if you're reading this letter before a full year has passed, I know you. You're impatient and curious and you can't help yourself. That's okay. I'm not mad. By now you've found my letters. You've read the one I wrote to you, and probably the ones I wrote to the kids too, even though I asked you not to. Again, it's okay. I know you. You're probably confused and maybe a little angry with me. You're wondering why I would write letters revealing the truth about Sarah after spending 50 years keeping the secret. You're wondering if I want you to give the kids their letters or destroy them. You're wondering what the hell I was thinking. Here's the truth. I don't know what I want you to do. When I started writing these letters, I thought I was being brave. I thought I was finally doing the right thing by bringing the truth into the light. I thought secrets were poison and honesty was medicine. But the more I wrote, the less certain I became. Sarah's been living for almost 50 years believing I'm her biological father. Is it kind to take that away from her? Is it necessary? Does she need to know this truth? Or would it just hurt her for no good reason? So I'm leaving it up to you, Janet. You're the only one who can make this decision. You know our children better than I do. You'll know whether they can handle this truth, whether they need this truth, or whether it's better left buried with me. If you decide to give them the letters, I've tried to write them with love and grace. I've tried to explain why we kept this secret and why I chose to love Sarah as my own. I hope it's enough. If you decide not to give them the letters, I understand that too. Burn them if you want. Lock them away. Pretend you never found them. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is protect them from truths they don't need to carry. The choice is yours. And whatever you decide, I trust it will be the right decision. All my love, William. I looked at the toolbox full of letters. Letters for each child. Letters for grandchildren. Letters marked for different occasions and different times. William's last words to all of us, carefully written and preserved, waiting for me to decide their fate. Orchestrated narrative structure and tracked emotional arc progression. I'm at a good point in the story. Let me check my word count so far. Sections completed. Section 1, opening. 700-800 words. Section 2, background. So 500 words. Section 3, development, established life. 3 500 words. Section 4, tension escalation. 3 zeros now was not words saying. Section 5, discovery climax. Ongoing. Need to complete this section. Current total, approximately 700 words. Section 5 needs to be 2, DOA 02, 500 words and should include exact moment of discovery, confrontation, detailed, 800 words. Sensory description of the moment, sounds, smells, sights, 500 words. Controlled initial reaction, internal processing, 350 words. Mental processing of the new reality, 350 words. Turning point, decision for action resolution. 500 words. I've covered the discovery pretty well, but I need to continue with more of her immediate emotional processing and the sensory details of the moment. Let me continue section 5 and then move to section 6. Also need to remember to include engagement CTAs. Reminder. 1. Middle of section 4. We'll need to add this. Reminder 2. After climax, beginning of section 6. Reminder 3. Final CTA in section 9. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the workshop windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I was still sitting on that stool, surrounded by William's tools and his unfinished projects and his carefully written words. My face was wet with tears I didn't remember crying. My throat was raw. My hands ached from gripping the letters so tightly. I looked around the workshop with new eyes. Every tool he'd hung with such care. Every piece of wood he'd saved because it was too beautiful to throw away. Every project he'd started and finished and given away to people he loved. This hadn't just been his workspace. This had been his sanctuary. The place where he could think and create, and apparently pour his heart out onto paper. How many hours had he spent out here writing these letters? How many times had he struggled with what to say, crossed out lines, started over? How much love had gone into every word? I pulled out the letters one by one, looking at each envelope. There were more than I'd initially realized. Letters for specific milestones. To Sarah on your 50th birthday was dated for this coming November. To Michael, if you ever doubt yourself. To Jennifer about following your heart. To David about carrying on my work. There were letters for grandchildren. To Emma when you graduate high school. To Jake on your wedding day. And there were more letters to me. So many more letters to me. To Janet on our 50th anniversary, which we would have celebrated this coming May if William had lived. To Janet, when you're ready to love again. That one made me cry all over again. The idea that William wanted me to find love after he was gone. That he'd actually written me a letter encouraging it. At the very bottom of the toolbox, Beneath all the other letters, I found one more envelope. This one was different from the others, thicker. The paper was nicer, like he'd bought special stationery for it. It was addressed to my entire family. Read together. This was it. This was the letter he'd intended for all of us to read together. The one that would explain everything, that would reveal the truth about Sarah in a way that brought us together instead of tearing us apart. I held it in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of it. This letter held the power to change everything, to shatter the image my children had of their family, of their history, of who they were. Or I could destroy it. I could burn all of these letters. I could take this secret back into myself and carry it alone for whatever years I had left. I could protect Sarah from ever knowing she was different. I could protect all my children from having to process this complicated truth. The sun was setting now, the workshop growing dim. I hadn't turned on any lights, and the space was filling with shadows. I needed to make a decision. I needed to figure out what William would have really wanted, what was best for our family. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd written. I needed to read that final letter. I opened the envelope and pulled out several pages of William's handwriting. The first page was dated December 28th, 2022, just 3 days after our last Christmas together, 18 days before he died. The letter began, "To my beloved family." Now, I could have kept reading right there in the workshop until it was too dark to see. I could have devoured every word William had written, desperate for more of his voice, more of his wisdom, more of him. But something stopped me. Some instinct that this letter, this final message to all of us, wasn't meant to be read alone in a cold workshop. It was meant to be read surrounded by family, by love, by the people William had spent his whole life protecting and caring for. I carefully placed all the letters back in the metal toolbox. I closed the lid and latched it, and then I carried it into the house like it was the most precious thing I'd ever held, because it was. It was March 12th, 2023. William had been gone for 57 days, and I had just discovered that everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about our secrets, about the burden I'd been carrying for 5 decades, had been completely wrong. William had known. He'd always known, and he'd loved us anyway. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the toolbox in front of me. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Outside, the last of the daylight was fading, and the mountains were turning purple against the darkening sky. What do you do when you discover your entire understanding of your life has been based on a misunderstanding? When the shame you've carried for decades turns out to have been unnecessary? When the man you thought you'd deceived had actually been the one keeping the bigger secret? I felt unmoored, floating in space with nothing to hold on to. My marriage had been real, William had said in his letter. Our love had been real. Our family had been real. I'd spent 50 years believing I'd built it all on a foundation of lies, but William was saying I'd actually built it on a foundation of choice, of grace, of love that transcended biology and pride and even betrayal. That night, I slept with the toolbox on William's side of the bed. I know that sounds crazy, but I needed to feel close to him, and those letters were all I had left. His voice, preserved in ink and paper. His love, documented and undeniable. I dreamed about him that night. We were in the workshop together, and he was showing me how to sand a piece of wood, guiding my hands with his. "See," he was saying, "you have to go with the grain, not against it. Everything's easier when you work with the natural direction of things." I woke up reaching for him, my hand finding only empty space and a metal toolbox. But the dream stayed with me. Work with the grain, not against it. What was the grain of this situation? What was the natural direction things needed to flow? Over the next few days, I read through all the letters multiple times. I read William's letter to me until I had parts of it memorized. I read the letters to the children, trying to imagine how each one would react. I held that final family letter in my hands over and over, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. Not alone. I need you to understand the position I was in. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Sarah, who'd lived her entire life believing William was her biological father. This was about Michael, Jennifer, and David, who'd never had any reason to question their family's story. This was about grandchildren and great-grandchildren and a whole network of family relationships that could be shaken by this truth. And I had to decide, alone, what to do about it. Maybe if you've been watching this far, you're starting to form opinions about what I should have done. Maybe you're thinking I should have destroyed the letters and kept the secret. Or maybe you're thinking the truth always deserves to come out. If you're still with me on this journey, would you take just a moment to hit that like button? And if something I've said has struck a chord with you, drop a comment and let me know what you're thinking. What would you do in my position? Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, what city or country. Your support means everything to this channel and helps these stories reach people who might need to hear them. Thank you for being here with me through this. I started calling the kids more often just to hear their voices, to listen to them talk about their lives, their jobs, their children. Sarah told me about Emma's college applications. Michael shared news about his youngest son making the varsity basketball team. Jennifer talked about a new art installation she was working on. David told me about a restoration project he'd taken on, refinishing an antique desk. And every conversation, I listened differently. I listened knowing that William had carried this secret through thousands of similar conversations. I listened wondering how it had felt for him to hear Sarah call him Dad, knowing what he knew. I listened trying to understand how he'd managed to love so completely while carrying such a significant truth. It took me 3 weeks to make my decision, 3 weeks of sleepless nights and endless internal debates. 3 weeks of prayer and crying and rage and gratitude all mixed up together. 3 weeks of trying to channel William's wisdom, trying to figure out what he would have truly wanted despite the contradictions in his letters. And finally, on April 2nd, 2023, I knew what I had to do. I called each of my children and asked them to come home for the weekend. I need to talk to you all about something, I said. About your father, about some things he left behind. Is everything okay, Mom? Sarah asked, worry in her voice. Yes, I told her, and no, but it will be. I just need you all here. They came, of course, all 4 of them, arriving on Friday evening with overnight bags and concerned expressions. They thought I was going to tell them I was sick, or that I was selling the house, or some other crisis. They gathered in the living room, the same living room where we'd held William's wake, and waited for me to explain. I brought the toolbox in and set it on the coffee table. Your father left us letters, I said. A lot of letters. And before we read any of them, I need to tell you a story about a very young, very scared woman who made some mistakes and spent the next 50 years trying to make up for them. And then I told them everything. The hardest part was looking at Sarah while I told the story, watching her face as she realized what I was leading up to, seeing the moment of comprehension dawn in her eyes, followed immediately by confusion, then hurt, then something I couldn't quite name. I started at the beginning. I told them about the winter of 1973, about William losing his job, about our financial desperation. I told them about David Mitchell, about the affair, about discovering I was pregnant and knowing the baby wasn't William's. Michael's mouth fell open. Jennifer grabbed Maria's hand so hard her knuckles went white. David just stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. But Sarah sat perfectly still, her face unreadable. And that terrified me more than any other reaction would have. I explained about hiding the truth, about living with the guilt, about watching William love Sarah and never knowing he knew. I pulled out William's letter to me and read parts of it aloud, my voice breaking on the words, "I chose to love her completely, without reservation, without holding back." He knew? Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. Dad knew the whole time? Since before you were born, I said. He found out from blood types, and he made a choice, Sarah. He chose you. He chose us. He chose love. I handed her the letter William had written to her. He wanted you to know. He wrote this for you. But Sarah, you need to understand. You are his daughter. Biology doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. Sarah took the letter with shaking hands. She didn't open it right away. She just sat there holding it, staring at the envelope with her name on it in her father's handwriting. So she started, then stopped. Started again. Michael, Jennifer, and David are my half-siblings? No, I said firmly. They're your siblings. Full stop. Family isn't about blood, Sarah. Your father proved that every single day of your life. Michael spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah, you're my sister. That hasn't changed. That will never change. He was your dad, Jennifer added, moving to sit next to Sarah on the couch. He was completely your dad. Nothing about that was fake or less real. David didn't say anything, but he nodded in agreement, his eyes red with unshed tears. Sarah finally opened her letter. We all sat in silence while she read it, watching her face change as she took in William's words. She cried. We all cried. The living room that had been so silent filled with the sounds of grief and processing and love all tangled together. When she finished, Sarah looked up at me. You've been carrying this alone for 50 years. Yes. And Dad knew and never told you he knew? Yes. She shook her head in wonder. I don't even have words for what that is. I know. Are you angry with me? I had to ask. For the affair? For lying all these years? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You were 23 years old and terrified. You made a mistake. But that mistake resulted in me, and Dad's choice resulted in this family. And I can't be angry about that. I can't be angry about something that gave me the most amazing father any daughter could ask for. She paused, then added, I'm sad. I'm confused. I feel like I need to rewrite my entire understanding of my life. But angry? No, I'm not angry. She looked at the toolbox on the coffee table. What else did he write? I pulled out the letters William had written for each of them. They each took their letters and read them quietly, processing William's words. The room was filled with sniffling and occasional quiet sobs as they encountered their father's voice again, his love and wisdom reaching them from beyond death. Finally, I pulled out the last letter, the one addressed to all of us together. He wrote one more, I said, for all of us to read as a family. Do you want to hear it? They nodded. I opened the envelope and began to read aloud. To my beloved family, if you're all together reading this letter, it means Janet found my hiding place in the workshop. It means she had the courage to tell you the truth about Sarah's biological father. And it means you've all chosen to stay together to hear what I have to say. I'm proud of you for that. I'm writing this on December 28th, 2022, 3 days after what might be our last Christmas together. My heart is failing. I can feel it. The doctors keep adjusting my medications and telling me to take it easy. But I know my body and I know my time is running short. So I need to say some things while I still can. First, to Sarah. You are my daughter. I need to say that clearly, definitively, without any doubt. The man whose DNA you carry is irrelevant. He was a mistake your mother made during the worst time in our marriage. But you, Sarah, you are not a mistake. You are a gift. You have been nothing but a gift from the moment you came into this world. I have never loved you less than your siblings. I have never looked at you and seen someone else's child. When I look at you, I see my daughter. I see the little girl who used to hold my hand on walks around the neighborhood. I see the teenager who came to me crying when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I see the strong woman who moved to Phoenix to build her own life, even though it meant leaving us behind. You are mine, Sarah. You will always be mine. To Michael, Jennifer, and David. Your sister is your sister. The circumstances of her birth don't change the fact that she's been by your side for your entire lives. She's the one who defended you from bullies. She's the one who taught you how to deal with Mom when she was in one of her moods. She's the one who celebrated your victories and commiserated with your losses. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And Sarah has been loyal to you from day one, to all my children. What I want you to understand is that families are built. They're not just born. Yes, biology plays a role, but the real work of family is in the showing up. It's in the daily choice to love and support and forgive each other. It's in staying together when it would be easier to walk away. Your mother and I built this family together. We built it through struggles and sacrifices. We built it through mistakes and forgiveness. We built it through thousands of ordinary moments that stacked together became an extraordinary life. Don't let this revelation tear down what we built. Don't let a truce about the past destroy the reality of the present. And to my darling Janet, I know you're reading this aloud to them, your voice probably shaking, wondering if you should have just burned all these letters instead of sharing them. I know you're scared that this truce has damaged our family irreparably. But love, look around the room. Look at our children. Look at the family we created together. This truce hasn't destroyed anything. If anything, it's shown just how strong our foundation really is. You did not fail me by having an affair with David Mitchell. You did not betray me beyond redemption. You were a scared young woman who made a mistake, and that mistake led to one of the greatest blessings of my life. I want you to hear this clearly. I forgive you. I forgave you 50 years ago, before you even knew you needed forgiving. And more than that, I thank you. Thank you for Sarah. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me be her father. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me, even while carrying such a heavy secret. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. To all of you, my final words are these. Love each other. Forgive each other. Choose each other every day the way I chose this family 50 years ago. That's what makes us real. That's what makes us strong. I have to leave you now. My body is giving out, but my heart is full. Full of love for each and every one of you. Full of gratitude for the life we've shared. Full of certainty that you will take care of each other after I'm gone. Be kind. Be brave. Be family. All my love, forever and always. William Dad Grandpa. By the time I finished reading, we were all crying. Not quiet tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep in your soul. We sat in that living room, me and my 4 children, united in our grief and our love and our commitment to each other, and we let ourselves fall apart together. Eventually, Sarah stood up. She walked over to where I was sitting and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked through my tears. "For telling us, for trusting us with this, for carrying this burden alone for so long, because you thought you were protecting us." She pulled me into a hug, and then suddenly we were all hugging, all 5 of us in a tangle of arms and tears and forgiveness and love, choosing each other, just like William had asked us to. That night we stayed up late into the morning talking about William and his extraordinary capacity for love, about family and what it really means, about forgiveness and grace and second chances, about the courage it takes to tell the truth and the courage it takes to hear it. We looked through the other letters in the toolbox. There were so many treasures there. Advice for the grandchildren, words of encouragement for specific challenges each child might face, memories William wanted to make sure we never forgot. And there was one more letter I hadn't shown them yet, one addressed to me that I'd been afraid to read. To Janet, when you're ready to move forward. The weekend with my children changed something fundamental in me. A weight I'd carried for 50 years, the weight of secrecy, of guilt, of fear, finally lifted. I could breathe fully for the first time in decades. The truth was out, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, our family felt stronger, more honest, more real than ever before. Sarah stayed an extra few days after the others left. We spent that time talking, really talking, in a way we never had before. She asked me questions about David Mitchell, about the affair, about what I'd felt during that time. She asked about her pregnancy, about whether I'd ever considered telling William the truth, about how I'd managed to live with the secret for so long. And I answered her honestly, every question, even the hard ones, even the ones that made me look weak or selfish or foolish, because I owed her that. After a lifetime of lies and half-truths, I owed her complete honesty. "Do you ever wonder about him?" she asked one evening as we sat in the kitchen drinking tea. "My biological father." I thought about it carefully before answering. "No," I finally said. "He was a moment in time, Sarah, a mistake born of desperation and fear. He's not your father. He never was. He was just DNA, nothing more." Sarah nodded slowly. "I don't think I want to find him, or know anything about him. Is that wrong?" "No, honey, it's not wrong at all. You get to decide what information matters to you and what doesn't." She took a sip of her tea. "Dad was my father, is my father, will always be my father. The man who donated some genetic material 48 years ago is irrelevant to who I am." "Your father would be so proud to hear you say that." "I know." She smiled through fresh tears. I can practically hear him saying it. After Sarah left to go back to Phoenix, I found myself alone in the house again. But this time, the solitude felt different, lighter. I wasn't carrying a crushing secret anymore. I wasn't looking at every corner of my life through a lens of guilt and shame. I finally read the letter William had written for when I was ready to move forward. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, and exactly what I needed to hear. He told me not to mourn him forever. He told me I'd been a wonderful wife and deserved to find joy again, even happiness with someone else if that's what I wanted. He gave me permission to sell the house if staying there became too painful. He gave me permission to get rid of his things, to change the furniture arrangement, to make the space mine instead of ours. He gave me permission to live. "You've spent 50 years putting everyone else first," he wrote. "You raised our children. You built our home. You supported my business. You carried a secret that wasn't even yours to carry alone. Now it's time for you to think about what Janet wants. What would make Janet happy? Where Janet wants to go and what she wants to do. Be selfish for once, my love. You've earned it." So I decided to be selfish, not in big ways, not dramatically, but in small, significant ways that made my life more mine. I started by clearing out the workshop, not getting rid of William's tools. David wanted those, and I saved some of the special ones for the grandchildren. But I cleared out the clutter and the half-finished projects and the accumulated debris of 40 years. I swept the floors and washed the windows and let light into that space. And then I turned it into an art studio. I'd always loved painting when I was younger, before marriage and kids and life took up all my time. I'd given it up gradually, without really noticing, until one day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd held a paintbrush. So I bought myself an easel and some canvases and good quality paints. I watched YouTube tutorials on my iPad. I joined a senior art class at the community center, and I started painting again. I was terrible at first. My hands were stiff from decades of disuse, my eye for color all wrong, my proportions laughable. but I kept at it. And slowly, gradually, I got better. Not great, not gallery-worthy, but good enough to enjoy it, which was all that mattered. The kids were surprised when they saw what I'd done with William's workshop, but supportive. "Dad would love this," Michael said, looking at my paintings drying on racks I'd built, with David's help, because I was learning carpentry too. I made other changes. I joined a book club. I started volunteering at the library 2 days a week. I took a watercolor class. I let myself sleep in on Sundays instead of dragging myself to church just because that's what I'd always done. I even went on a date. His name was Robert, and we met at the library where I volunteered. He was 75, a retired teacher, a widower like me. We had coffee. We talked about our late spouses and our children and our grandchildren. We discovered we both loved old Western novels and hated reality TV. It was nice, comfortable. And when he asked if he could see me again, I said yes. I haven't fallen in love with Robert. I don't know if I ever will. Part of me will always belong to William. But I've learned that the human heart has more capacity than we think. That loving someone new doesn't diminish the love we had for someone else. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. The kids have their own processing to do. Sarah especially. She started therapy. Working through what it means to discover your origin story was different than you thought. She's struggling with questions of identity and belonging, even as she insists that William was and is her father. Jennifer offered to do a DNA test with her, just to confirm scientifically what we already knew, that they're half-siblings, not full. But Sarah declined. "I don't need a test to tell me you're my sister," she said. Michael and David have been protective of Sarah in a way that's both touching and a little overbearing. They keep calling to check on her, making sure she's okay, making sure this hasn't damaged her sense of family. But Sarah's strong, stronger than any of us gave her credit for. "I've had almost 50 years with the best dad in the world," she told them. Finding out he's not my biological father doesn't change one single memory. It doesn't make him less real. If anything, it makes what we had more precious, because he chose me. Every single day, he chose me. We're planning a memorial for William's birthday this coming August. All the kids and grandkids will be here. We're going to have a barbecue in the backyard and tell William stories, and maybe read a few more of his letters. We're going to celebrate the man who taught us what real love looks like. I've also started writing my own letters, not to leave for after I die. I'm only 73 and in pretty good health, so hopefully that's many years away. But letters to my children and grandchildren about my own life, my own journey, my own lessons learned. Because William was right. Secrets are poison. Truth, spoken with love, has the power to heal. I write about my childhood in Denver, about meeting William, about the early struggles of our marriage. I write about the affair with David Mitchell and the fear and guilt that followed. I write about watching William be a father to Sarah and never knowing he knew the truth. I write about finding the letters and making the choice to share them. I write about forgiveness, both receiving it and learning to give it to myself. I write about the difference between biology and family, between mistakes and failures, between surviving and truly living. And I write about love, the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of love that chooses to stay even when leaving would be easier. Love that forgives the unforgivable. Love that sees the truth and loves anyway. My life didn't turn out the way I planned. When I was a 19-year-old girl ringing up groceries at Safeway, I never imagined any of this. The affair, the secret, the guilt, the decades of fear. But I also never imagined the depth of love I'd experience, the strength I'd discover in myself, the family I'd help build. William used to say that wood has a grain, a natural direction, and you have to work with it, not against it. I've learned that life has a grain too. Things happen, mistakes get made, secrets accumulate, the truth comes out in its own time. You can fight against the grain, or you can work with it. You can let the difficulties shape you into something stronger, more beautiful, more real. I'm not the same woman I was when William died. I'm not even the same woman I was when I found those letters. I'm someone new, forged from truth and grief and love and forgiveness. I'm someone who's finally learning, at 73 years old, to put down the burdens I was never meant to carry alone. Looking back on the past 2 years since William's death, I can see a clear trajectory. From the devastation of losing him, through the shocking discovery of his letters, to the difficult process of telling my children the truth, to this new life I'm building for myself. It's all been part of becoming whole. The relationship with my children has deepened in ways I never expected. We talk more openly now, more honestly. They ask me questions about my life, my feelings, my past, and I answer them. No more hiding, no more pretending I was always strong and always certain. Sarah and I have grown especially close. She calls me every week, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to process another layer of what it means to discover your father chose you rather than being biologically bound to you. She's come to see it as a gift, this knowledge that William's love was intentional, deliberate, chosen. Most people never know if their parents would have chosen them, she told me recently. They just know they were born, and their parents had to deal with it. But I know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that my dad chose me, chose to love me, chose to be my father. How many people get that certainty? She's right. In a strange way, what could have been a devastating revelation became a profound affirmation. William's letters didn't diminish his relationship with Sarah. They elevated it, made it sacred. The grandchildren have been amazing through all of this too. Emma, Sarah's daughter, wrote me a beautiful letter after learning the truth about her grandfather. He showed us what love really means, she wrote. That it's not about blood or obligation. It's about showing up and choosing each other and being there through everything. That's William's legacy, not the houses he built or the furniture he crafted, though those things are lovely. His real legacy is what he taught us about love, about grace, about the courage it takes to know hard truths and love anyway. I've been thinking a lot about the nature of secrets, about why we keep them and what they cost us. I kept my secret about Sarah's paternity for 50 years because I was afraid of losing William, afraid of losing my children's respect, afraid of destroying our family. But William kept his secret, knowing about mine, for different reasons. He kept it because he thought it would protect me. He thought if I knew he knew, I'd feel worse, carry more guilt, suffer more. He was trying to spare me pain. In the end, both kinds of secrets caused damage. Mine ate away at me from the inside, created a barrier between me and complete honesty with the people I loved most. His prevented us from having the kind of marriage we could have had if we'd been able to talk openly about what we both knew. I wish we'd had that conversation. I wish on some ordinary Tuesday evening William had said, "Janet, I know about Sarah. I've known all along, and I want you to know that I love her, I love you, and this doesn't change anything." I wish I'd been brave enough to confess to him, to say, "I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been living with this guilt for years." But we didn't have that conversation. We each carried our piece of the truth separately, trying to protect each other, and in doing so, we missed out on the freedom that comes from complete honesty. That's one reason I decided to tell the children. Not just because William's letters gave me permission to, but because I didn't want them to spend their lives carrying secrets that would poison them from the inside. I wanted them to know that truth, even hard truths, can be survived, that families built on honesty are stronger than families built on comfortable lies. I've also been thinking about what makes a parent, what makes a mother or a father. The whole situation with Sarah has challenged every assumption I had about it. Is a father the man whose DNA you carry? Or is a father the man who walks the floor with you when you're colicky at 2 a.m.? Is a father the biological contributors, Or is he the one who teaches you to ride a bike and shows up at every school play and threatens your first boyfriend? William proved, definitively, that fatherhood is about choice, about showing up, about loving someone so completely that biology becomes irrelevant, and motherhood is no different. I've been Sarah's mother from the moment she was born. The affair with David Mitchell, the biological connection between him and Sarah, it's meaningless compared to 50 years of mothering, of bandaging scraped knees and attending parent-teacher conferences and staying up late waiting for her to come home from dates and helping her plan her wedding. Biology starts things, but love sustains them. Love makes them real. The Denver community where I've lived my entire life has been wonderful through all of this. Word got around, because word always gets around, that I'd discovered some letters from William after his death, and that they'd contained some family revelations. People at church and at the library where I volunteer have been kind without being nosy. They've offered support without prying for details. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor who'd comforted me the day William died, has become a good friend. She's a widow too, and we've bonded over the particular loneliness of losing a spouse after decades of marriage. She knows about the letters, about Sarah, about all of it, and she's been a sounding board as I've processed it all. The hardest part of widowhood, she told me once, is realizing how much of yourself you'd merged with another person. You have to figure out who you are as an individual again, what you like, what you want, what makes you happy. She's right, I'd been William's wife for so long that I'd forgotten how to be just Janet. The letters, in a strange way, helped with that. They reminded me that even within our marriage, even within our family, I was still my own person, with my own past, my own mistakes, my own journey. William's business partner, Mike, has been wonderful too. He and William worked together for over 30 years, and he's been helping David navigate taking over William's portion of the contracting company. But more than that, Mike has shared stories about William that I'd never heard. About times when William talked about our family, about how proud he was of the kids, about how much he loved me. He never said anything specific about Sarah, Mike told me. But I remember once, maybe 10 years ago, we were working on a deck and somehow got onto the topic of what makes a man a good father. And William said something I've never forgotten. He said, "A good father is someone who loves his children because of who they are, not because they came from him. Biology might make you a parent, but love makes you a father." Hearing that gave me chills. William had been living that philosophy for decades, and I'd never even known it. I've started going to a grief support group at the community center. It meets every Thursday evening, and it's a mixed group of people who've lost spouses, parents, children, friends. The losses are all different, but the grief is universal. Sharing my story there, about finding William's letters and discovering he'd known my secret all along, opened up deep conversations about love and forgiveness and family, about the secrets we keep and the truths we're afraid to tell. One woman in the group, Patricia, said something that really stuck with me. We're all just doing the best we can with the information we have at the time. You made decisions when you were 23 that you might not make now at 73. William made decisions about what to tell you and what to keep to himself. We're all fumbling through life, trying not to hurt the people we love, and sometimes we get it wrong. But it sounds like you and William, between you, got it right more often than you got it wrong. She's right. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We made mistakes, both of us. We kept secrets, both of us. But we also built something beautiful. We raised 4 incredible children. We created a home full of love. We showed up for each other day after day, year after year. And in the end, that's what matters. I've thought about reaching out to David Mitchell, not for Sarah's sake. She's made it clear she has no interest in him, but for my own closure, to tell him that his daughter turned out to be an amazing woman despite his complete absence from her life. to tell him what he missed by not being there. But I haven't done it, and I probably won't, because giving him any information about Sarah feels like a betrayal of William. David Mitchell doesn't deserve to know anything about the woman Sarah became. William earned that knowledge through years of love and sacrifice. David Mitchell contributed some DNA and walked away. He doesn't get to know how the story turned out. I've also been asked by some well-meaning people whether I feel like the affair was meant to be because it resulted in Sarah, whether I believe in fate or divine providence, bringing good out of mistakes. I don't know how to answer that. I don't think the affair was meant to be. I think it was a terrible mistake, made by a scared young woman who couldn't see any other options. But I do think William's response to it, his choice to love Sarah, to claim her as his daughter, to build our family anyway, that might have been something close to divine, not because God orchestrated the affair, but because William channeled something holy in his response to it. Grace, forgiveness, unconditional love. That's the story I want people to take from all of this. Not that affairs are okay because sometimes they result in beloved children, but that love, real love, has the power to redeem almost anything, that we're all capable of making terrible mistakes, and we're all capable of extending grace for those mistakes, that families can survive hard truths if they're built on a foundation of genuine love. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to thank you. Really thank you. This wasn't easy to share, and I know it wasn't easy to listen to. But these stories, these messy, complicated, real human stories, they need to be told. Because somewhere out there, someone else is carrying a secret. Someone else is wondering if the truth would destroy their family. Someone else is struggling with guilt from decades ago. And I want them to know, truth is scary, but it's survivable. Families are stronger than we think. And love, real, intentional, chosen love, can overcome almost anything. If this story has touched you in any way, if it's made you think about your own life, or your own family, or your own secrets, would you do me a favor? Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what resonated with you or what city or country you're watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. There are so many more stories like mine. Stories of women discovering strength they didn't know they had. Stories of families surviving what seemed unsurvivable. Stories of love in all its messy, complicated beauty. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. It helps build a community of people who understand that life is complicated, that families are imperfect, and that we're all just doing the best we can. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. It's been 2.5 years now since William died. 2 years since I found those letters in the workshop. 2 years since I told my children the truth and watched our family reorganize itself around honesty instead of secrets. I'm 73 years old. I've been alive for over 26,000 days, and I spent more than 18,000 of them married to William Adams. That's a lot of days, a lot of moments, a lot of ordinary conversations and extraordinary events all mixed together into a life. And here's what I've learned from all of it. Love is a choice. William proved that. Every day, for 48 years, he chose to love Sarah. He could have held back. He could have treated her differently. He could have let the truth of her paternity create distance. But he didn't. He chose love. Over and over and over again. Secrets have a cost. Both kinds. The ones we keep from others and the ones others keep from us. They create barriers. They prevent genuine intimacy. They make us carry burdens we were never meant to carry alone. If I could go back and change anything, it would be this. I would tell William the truth about the affair. Not right away, not in those early terrible months, but eventually. Once Sarah was a few years old and we were on solid ground financially and emotionally, I would confess. I would ask for forgiveness. I would let him reassure me that he loved Sarah and loved me and that we were going to be okay, Because we would have been okay. I know that now. William's letters proved it. He knew the worst thing about me and loved me anyway. Imagine the freedom we could have had if I'd known that he knew. Imagine the honesty. Imagine the intimacy. But we didn't have that. And I have to make peace with that too. We did the best we could with what we knew. We built a good life. We raised good kids. We loved each other deeply. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Family is what you build, not what you're born with. Biology matters, but it's not determinative. Sarah is Michael, Jennifer, and David's sister. Full stop. The fact that she has different biological father doesn't change 50 years of shared childhood, shared memories, shared love. They grew up together. They fought and laughed and supported each other. That's what makes them siblings, not DNA. Love and history and choice. It's never too late to start living authentically. I'm 73. I spent 50 years living with a secret that poisoned my life in small, insidious ways. I thought I'd carry it to my grave. But William's letters gave me a second chance. A chance to live openly. A chance to be fully known by the people I love. A chance to build my remaining years on truths instead of lies. And in these 2 years since the revelation, I've felt more free, more alive, more myself than I have in decades. It's terrifying sometimes. This authenticity. It means being vulnerable. It means admitting mistakes. It means letting people see your flaws and failures. But it also means being fully present, fully connected, fully human. I've also learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not just the other person. I needed to forgive myself for the affair, for the secret, for the 50 years of guilt and fear. William had already forgiven me. That was clear from his letters. But I needed to forgive myself. That's been the hardest part. Harder than telling the kids. Harder than processing William's death. Forgiving myself for being young and scared and making terrible choices. For not being perfect. For being human. I'm still working on it. Some days are better than others. Some days I can look at my reflection and see a woman who survived, who built something beautiful out of ashes. Other days I still see that scared 23-year-old who betrayed her marriage and then spent half a century trying to make up for it. But I'm getting there, slowly, with the help of my kids and my therapist and my grief group and my new friends and this strange new life I'm building. I've started painting portraits, mostly of William from photographs. I'm trying to capture not just how he looked, but who he was, the kindness in his eyes, the slight smile that always played at the corners of his mouth, the strength in his hands. It's my way of honoring him, of making sure his grandchildren and great-grandchildren know who he was, of preserving the man who taught me what unconditional love looks like. The kids come home more often now, not just for holidays, but for random weekends. They bring the grandkids, and we fill the house with noise and laughter and chaos. We tell stories about William. We read his letters together. We keep his memory alive. And we're honest with each other in ways we never were before. When Sarah is struggling, she calls and tells me. When Michael is worried about one of his kids, he asks for advice. When Jennifer is frustrated with her career, she vents. When David needs to talk about the pressure of carrying on his father's business legacy, he comes over. We're real with each other, messy and complicated and wonderfully, beautifully real. I think that's what William wanted most. Not a perfect family, there's no such thing. But a real one, an honest one built on love and choice and forgiveness. We're becoming that family. Not because the revelation about Sarah made us perfect, but because it made us honest. It forced us to confront hard truths and choose each other anyway, just like William chose us 50 years ago. This coming May would have been our 50th anniversary. William and I would have been married for half a century. I've been planning something special to mark the day, even though he won't be here to celebrate it with me. I'm going to gather all the kids and grandkids. We're going to have a party at the house, a celebration of William's life and our family. We're going to read more of his letters. There are still ones I haven't shared yet, ones marked for specific occasions that haven't happened yet. We're going to tell stories and look at old photographs and remember. And I'm going to read aloud a letter I've written to William, saying all the things I never got to say when he was alive. Thanking him for loving Sarah, thanking him for loving me, thanking him for building this family with me, asking for forgiveness for the secrets, promising to live the rest of my life as honestly and openly as I can. It won't bring him back, I know that. But it will honor who he was and what he taught us, and it will mark a turning point for me, from the past to the future, from secrets to truth, from guilt to grace. I don't know how many years I have left. Could be 5, could be 25. My mother lived to be 91, so the genes are good, but I've learned not to take time for granted. William thought he had more time too. What I do know is that I'm going to spend whatever time I have left living fully, painting and volunteering and dating Robert, and spending time with my children and grandchildren, traveling maybe to places William and I always talked about but never got around to visiting, writing my own letters, my own wisdom, to leave behind for the people I love. I'm going to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world, stop diminishing myself, stop carrying guilt for being imperfectly human. William's letters gave me that gift, the gift of knowing I was loved despite my worst mistakes, the gift of understanding that love is a choice, not an obligation, the gift of seeing that truth, even painful truth, can heal instead of destroy. And that's the message I want to leave with you, whoever you are, wherever you're watching from. You are not your worst mistake. You are not your biggest secret. You are not defined by the things you're most ashamed of. You are defined by your choices, by how you show up, by how you love, by how you forgive, both yourself and others. If you're carrying a secret that's poisoning you, find someone safe to tell. The secret loses its power when you bring it into the light. If you're struggling to forgive yourself for something you did years ago, know this. You were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. You deserve grace. You deserve forgiveness. You deserve to move forward. If you're wondering if you'll ever feel whole again after loss or betrayal or revelation, I can tell you, yes. Not the same as before. You'll be different. But you can be whole again. You can build something new and beautiful from the broken pieces. It's never too late. I'm 73, and I'm just now learning how to live authentically, just now learning to paint and to speak my truth and to forgive myself. Just now learning what it means to honor the people I've loved by living fully instead of hiding. William used to say that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. The same is true for truth, for forgiveness, for change, for living authentically. The best time would have been years ago, but the second best time is right now. So that's what I'm doing. I'm planting my tree. I'm living my truth. I'm honoring William's memory by being brave enough to be myself. And I'm here to tell you, you can too. Whatever you're carrying, whatever you're hiding, whatever you're ashamed of, you can survive its revelation. You can heal. You can build something new and beautiful, because love is stronger than secrets. Truth is more powerful than shame, and we are all capable of more grace than we know. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you take nothing else from it, take this. You are loved. You are worthy. And it's never too late to start living like you believe it.